live. Hi, everyone. Here we are today with Celeste Garcia. She's actually an ex Microsoft veteran and she is actually AI ethicist. Her chapter we talked about, and she drew a very important chapter about the dark sector and the heavy toll of the current AI we are using. So let's first welcome Celeste and please introduce yourself.
Hi. So I'm Celeste Garcia, and my background was in tech marketing at Microsoft. And I'm since then I've sort of found myself at the intersection of creativity and tech. And sort of how I really started my AI journey was that I wrote a novel called AI Baby. And even though it's a humorous speculative fiction, it required a lot of research, and I started that in early 2023. And, once I sort of started, I likened it to the heart of darkness, where I was sort of floating down that river and I sort of, into the heart of darkness. And obviously, AI is an amazing technology, but there's particularly a lot of ethical concerns. And so once I'd finished the novel, I just, kept thinking and writing about AI and got on Substack. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. When you were writing your novel, AI Baby, do you find AI immature technology that it unleashed too early, or it is ready for people to use it and it works? Because we are going to talk about it in details, but it's like I find the AI now is not giving us what it promises, despite the cost of it and all the marketing and hype for it. And the cost of it is the damage it's coming with is very is hefty.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be labeled a decel, but there is sort of this thought that, maybe it could have existed in the lab a little longer, but that train has left the station. And so we're in a situation now where we we need to figure it out as far as, what role it will play in our lives. And myself and a lot of people on Substack that we've sort of built this community are highlighting some of the ethical questions that are of great concern, whether it's governance and guardrails, whether it's copyright infringement, whether it's, you know, existential risk, which ironically the tech bros like to talk about.
Yeah.
Or in what we're going to discuss today is labor exploitation,
Yeah.
which is, I think a lot of people don't realize it, and
Yeah.
it's really astonishing that that's something that's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, in your chapter, which is very courageous from you, because you put spotlight on the ghost work behind AI, and you mentioned a case from Kenya and Colombia. So why don't you elaborate on the cases and what you find from ghost work and the exploitation of sheep laborers?
Yeah, and one thing that I open with is that AI seems like it's working by magic, and you put in a prompt and out comes this inference. And what most people, and I understand why they're not thinking about it, is, you know, AI implies that it's, all completely artificial intelligence. And of course, that's by design because the people behind it really want you to think that, because it sort of makes them, makes this product even more impressive. But there's also, as I've delved into it, there's sort of this hidden layer of labor exploitation. So most people, I mean, a lot of people realize that there's just this massive amount of data that goes in to creating these systems. And it's really one of the pillars of AI. I mean, you've got algorithms and compute and energy, and you have the data that goes into these systems. And it can't simply. So right now, tech companies are they're taking any and all data they can possibly get their hands on because it's what really powers these systems. And so what people don't think about is that, it's raw data. And so a lot of it is being scraped off the internet. And so even though it seems like these systems are sentient, they they can only, they're good at statistical and predicting, um but they actually don't have thoughts and feelings. And so it takes this huge labor force of humans that need to prepare the data, the raw data. And so it has to be labeled and filtered. And so this is where, there's many tasks involved in preparing this data. And so this is where this labor ecosystem has evolved.
Um, as a data engineer, like, when we deal with the data, I have to rearrange them and clean them and even organize them in terms of confidentiality. And this takes a lot of time, the design of which data to go where and the level of privilege. Who do you think should be accountable? Because all AIs are biases. Because if someone, they hire an uneducated person and he made a mistake based on his judgment or in his culture, or he doesn't have enough instruction, the data will be entered and labeled wrong, and the model will be based on it. Should be accountable for that? The
Well,
laborers who has no instruction, or the company?
Well, that's a bigger issue as far as accountability, ultimately, as far, when, when outputs maybe are misleading, misguiding, but ultimately it comes down to the frontier labs. They're the ones that are producing the models, and they're the ones that are releasing these. There's all this pressure to release new updates, new versions, and at an astounding rate. And it's just so different from. I mean, when I was at Microsoft, it was still, producing software, and nobody wanted to release a product before it was ready, and you wanted to get rid of all the bugs. But, the new paradigm is release, launch to millions of people, and address any issues later.
Yeah, hit
So,
and run.
yeah, so, or, move fast and break things, which they
Yes.
basically live and die by. And so, I mean, to me, it's really obvious that the people that are ultimately responsible are the frontier labs. And I mean, and what I mean by that is we're talking about OpenAI, we're talking about Google, we're talking about XAI, we're talking about Meta, and they all have, these models that we're all interfacing with, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT, etc. So, and as much as, and I think we're going to discuss this, as much as they try to distance themselves from the supply chain of data, they're they're ultimately responsible, but they are not taking responsibility. And there's been this whole ecosystem of preparing the data that has been built and really designed so that they are, they're obscured, and it's opaque, and there's just no transparency.
Actually, this lead to my next point in your chapter when you mentioned the hide and seek, that the company structure design is actually to escape any accountability. It's like they have an external build, an external design that no one should be aware of. Um, and there is the one which is in front, which is by hype and marketing to everyone. So you mentioned a case with this SEC filing that already happened, that they were really was very difficult to trace, and no one noticed it, and they are trying to avoid any legality, accountability, any responsibility of it. Would you elaborate on this part?
Yeah, and they built this well, Freudian slip, ecosystem around the data preparing the data,
Billions of dollars.
and it's so complicated. And even, the little reporting I've really seen on the labor exploitation, I found that a lot of the news outlets aren't even quite getting it right. And that they don't that they don't always find who's absolutely ultimately is responsible. But so I'll give this example, and this is really what sort of got me down the labor exploitation track. Is probably people have heard of Alexander Wang, and he was lauded as the new tech bro boy wonder, and he started a company called Scale AI. And he liked to talk about that they were the foundry. So they were sort of this data foundry, and they were taking the raw materials and then producing the end product. So the the tech companies, that they would hand over their data, and then there was this huge process of refining, labeling, tagging the data. And so Scale AI was that vendor. And I'm I'm guessing pretty early on they figured out, I guess the natural instinct was to pay people as little as possible, and, obviously try to have it, the biggest profits possible. And so they created this system where you have, for example, so Scale AI created their platform called Remote Tasks. And then they have a subsidiary called and the let me back up a second. The Washington Post actually did delve into this. So Scale AI created a subsidiary, and in the Philippines, this subsidiary was then a subsidiary of Smart Ecosystems Philippines. And they actually looked at the SEC filings, and it took to page 5 to find out that Scale AI was the ultimate parent company. And then even downstream of that, and further protected, of course, is whatever big tech firm is contracting with Scale AI, or whatever data labeling firm. So I guess, the brilliance of it is that they have created this system where even if you wanted to dig into it, it's very, very difficult.
I think Michael, the director of Scale AI, he was hired by actually the White Office um, of the for to head the Science and Technology Policy Department. In the meantime, his company was investigated under this exploitation. So he was really getting an official post in the House so he can waive off all his charges against him.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot at play there. So, first of all, Alexander Wang, who started Scale AI, was rewarded handsomely for building an ecosystem of labor exploitation. And he is now heading up Meta's AI lab. And when I first, that was in June of 2025 that was announced. And again, that sort of sparked me starting to investigate, because I thought,
Yeah.
wow, this guy, what's really behind this, and why would Meta pay $14.5 billion for a percentage of his company and bring him on board?
Mm.
And so it wasn't, I mean, what was rather astonishing is, you could Google, or, use
Mm.
ChatGPT to find out that there was these labor exploitation allegations, and there was actually an active DOL investigation, Department of Labor investigation. So if you go even further, if you peel this onion um, even more, there's just sort of this revolving door of the the people who are, in the private sector, yeah, of these big tech firms, and then they're also then sort of weaving back and forth between private sector and having, in the government, having positions in the federal government. So the head of OSTEP currently, his name is Michael Kratsios, And he originally worked for Peter Thiel and sort of cut his teeth on the intersection of uh, tech and policy. And so then he was the CTO in the first Trump administration. And then he joined Scale AI as the managing director. So he did that for 4 years. Um, those 4 years of the interim. And then in uh, February 2025, he was appointed as head of OSTEP, which is the Office of Science and Technology, which reports directly to the president.
The
So
president.
it was, and at the time, so the company was under active
Investigation.
investigation by the Department of Labor. And I actually talked to a whistleblower, and originally that investigation started sometime in 2024. It seemed like a really open and shut case. And this
Hmm.
had nothing to do with the other allegations outside of the US of labor exploitation. This was having to do with misclassification of contract workers and a lot of other issues, that these contract workers, sometimes they were employees, were raising. And so fast forward, Michael Kratsios sails through his confirmation hearings and is sworn in as head of OSTEP. And I think was in March of 2025.
I think he still is in those days.
Yes, he's still
Yes, he
active
is.
head of OSTEP. But so then this Department of Labor investigation was quietly dropped in around June of 2025. So I mean, it's sort
It
of the fox guarding the hen house, and it you know
kind of
it,
created.
go ahead.
Yes, they kind of created like a Mobius cycle. You know the Mobius forms that whatever you start, you will end up with the same point. It is always politics leads the economics, and the technology in between is being used and abused. And the cycle, you cannot know where it starts and where it ends.
Right. Yeah, it's an endless loop. And, so now
Yeah.
he's creating policy around AI. And obviously, the goal is zero regulation. And what's really interesting is there was an executive
Yeah.
order
Ah,
to sort of disallow states to create their own laws around AI. And so then Kratsios was tasked with figuring out what the federal government's policies around AI regulation is, which is basically zero. So, and then, another point being that he's very likely holds equity in Scale AI. Um,
the
so
company still exists or is diluted
it
or
does.
dissolved?
And they've sort of moved on a little bit,
Okay. Did
changing
he not change
their
the name, rebrand
their
themselves?
business model. They haven't rebranded, yeah, but it still exists.
Yeah, that's shame because it's like it's take it or leave it. Like we are who we are and go F yourself if you feel like it. Like this type of attitude is like I hate it, but it's become very common. Previously it was behind curtain and in hush hush. Now it is it's like in a vulgar format in public.
Well, I think that there's always been this feeling that these companies can really act with impunity, and this has been one of my, um, fears about AI is that you have a handful of technology companies and tech bros that have unlimited resources and unlimited power, and they
Yeah.
really, it's like an oligarchy, and they have more power than any elected official. And so they've always been able to act with impunity. I mean, I think everybody followed, social media that our kids were being experimented on, and the dangers that Meta um, knew about. But, I mean, in the end, it's all driven by profit. And so I think, it's kind of same old story, different day, but
Yes.
they've gotten
Just
even
different
smarter.
attire for the same game.
Yeah.
Different attire. Yes,
Yeah.
and this leads to your next point in your chapter, which is actually the shield they are using, national security. This protection, protective halo, and actually you very well expressed it, because it is. They use this kind of fear. It's like, this is national security. We need to act. We need to stop. We need to keep pushing. So they give themselves a pretext for their conscience to stay asleep or whatever, so they can keep going on in their track regardless, in an abusive manner.
Yeah, and I call that the protective halo
Halo, yeah.
where, in the name of national security and we have to, it's the new arms race this time with China. And I mean, certainly, there's legitimacy to um wanting to, have
There is a
some,
ground for it.
some dominance
Yeah.
in the technology, and I can't be naive about that. But it also, allows them to act with impunity, no, no guardrails, no, not taking any responsibility. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, so, who's going to want to be the person who says, wait a minute, who's going to want to, when it comes down to national security, to sort of put the brakes on. But my assertion, and I think what everybody on Substack and others who look into the ethics is, there's no reason why you cannot have ethics, as part of the process. And it doesn't have to slow it down. It doesn't have to be an either or. And so
To
it
lead the
just,
right path.
pardon me?
To lead the right path, we need ethicists. Yes. If you
Right.
want to.
Why is that so hard? And so, and maybe I should take a step back and just maybe explain sort of the further about the labor exploitation. And so, and one thing, and I discuss in the chapter is, the tech bros love to compare AI to the Industrial Revolution. And the great irony is that they are stealing a play out of that playbook and, basically have created labor exploitation at scale. And so, once again, you're seeing the economically powerful exploit people that are how or just need a job and are looking to elevate their economic status. And this is not by mistake that there are labor laws in the US, and there are, protections that are put in place and expectations of pay and conditions. But so, of course, this is where they've sought, most of this labor exploitation is happening in the global south. So places like the Philippines, Kenya, um, and then South America, Venezuela, Colombia. And so the places where, there's economic hardship and people are more desperate to work. But what's interesting is the people they're employing are usually quite educated, and they're really hoping to get a foothold in technology. And
Yeah. A big
but
factor.
what's going on is that they're interacting with these platforms. There's no transparency. And it's really dehumanizing, and these platforms, they can, because I use, for example, remote tasks, which is Scale AI's international platform. So, there's it's dehumanizing because they're just acting, you know, um, interacting with the machine. And so they're not being paid for training. And each task, they'll need tutorials for what exactly they're supposed to do, whether they're stack ranking or, you know, uh, confirming a definition is correct, whatever it is that they're doing. And they're under so much time constraint that, if they don't perform up to expectation or they're moving too slow, the platform could just shut them out, and they have no idea why. And whether they get paid for that work or not, that's a question. And the wages are, the estimates I've seen are $1.32 to $2 an hour.
Um,
So it's just so astounding. But I mean, again, they like to make this comparison to the Industrial Revolution, and that they're basically mirroring the same type of labor
Imagine,
practices
yeah,
and really exploiting a vulnerable population. And these populations have very little recourse. If they complain, they'll be fired. And they, so, they're just hoping to, get, have employment and elevate themselves from poverty.
yeah. From your experience, this is actually leading me to one question. Like Microsoft has been always making product and technology, but they have been accountable. There has been a customer service, even if they are having a monopoly of the market, because it's either Microsoft use our system or there is none. They still were not dealing with the client with people like we listen to you, we do with you, and they launch product. How do you see the differences? Like why Microsoft run on profit? Still, all OpenAI, all LLM or all the AI models, they cannot generate any profit, despite the abuse, despite the monopoly, despite all the shields they are using and hyper marketing. How do you see the difference between in a business structure and design? Because this one was well trusted despite the monopoly, and then everyone wanted them. And this one is like we use them because there is no other choice. If we find another open way, we will move on. There is no loyalty to any AI company, but there was a loyalty in Microsoft.
So are you asking,
Do you see any behavior or the ecosystem structure that once it shifted, it's causing a collapse with their ecosystem, not the model, not the technology part, but they are not. Despite the reduced cost and whatever they exploit labor, they abuse all what the old marketplace. Still, they cannot make any profit. They cannot even sustain loyalty. They cannot get earn people trust. There is a loss of shadow around them.
yeah, and the Frontier Labs, like, this is all playing out in real time. And so, it's hard to say where, will these companies that, OpenAI and Anthropic, that have
Yeah,
trillion-dollar valuations. And, Anthropic is, I think they're already at 100 million revenue, but of course, what are the profit margins? And
but
the
yeah,
cap, and
revenue is not profit.
yeah, and the capex is astounding, right? Like the
Yeah,
trillions of dollars that they are spending and
the
plan
engine is closed.
spending for their infrastructure. So, that's sort of, I mean, I don't know if anybody can really predict how that's gonna play out and if it will, if
The
they really.
economic bite.
Yeah,
Mm.
but, I mean, I suspect that they'll prevail. I mean, once you IPO and you have so much money, you can, there's I think that by sheer force of will, they'll figure out, how to profit and figure out their business models. I do think, and this is kind of off topic, but I do think that the Friday's news, about China releasing, open weight models, and that China is basically commoditizing the, these systems, and, the companies in the US are all proprietary, and so it's gonna make it more difficult for them to, at least
Monetize.
with their current models, make money, because why would somebody pay for something they can get for free? So that's a whole 'nother issue. But, I mean, really, in the end, like any company that is providing a, frontier model, they the data that they are using was sourced by exploited labor.
Labels.
And so I think all of the big tech companies need to take responsibility. And what's really frustrating to me is that this could end tomorrow if they have contracts with companies like Scale AI and Sama and Appen, who are that take the data and get it training ready. Um, they could just build into the contracts that they have to pay a living wage and that they have to provide mental health for people that are looking at very disturbing content, which we haven't really discussed yet. But and I mean, sadly, we're even having this discussion. Why wouldn't they just do the right thing in the first place? And where you get to just the amorality or immorality of it is that you think about the money that these people, these companies are making, the money they're spending, and how much they're spending on every other pillar of AI. I mean, data is just one of the pillars, but you also have compute and you have infrastructure and you have algorithms, which is
and
produced by
utility.
talent, and they will spend, like just free willing spending on these other aspects. But with the data, which without data, these models are nothing. You have to have data, and that's not going to go away. Um, they have decided that this is just a place where they're going to try to pay very little money. And I mean, in the end, paying a living wage to these people and providing them some support
With respect.
but it's a rounding error. And
Yeah.
the money they're already spending and the money they're planning to make, and of course, it's more despicable. Well, it's all despicable, but that these tech bros that are, worth trillions of dollars, and the companies and the investors and people that are making this kind of money. So, yeah, I mean, and again, like that's why I really want to bring this to people's attention because it's just so obviously wrong.
I think you heard in the news now that Apple is suing OpenAI for actually using their secret or stealing their secret. Do you think the Kenyan government or maybe Philippine government can sue the Labor Department for abusing their people, or they cannot? There is no equal treatment.
Well, there
There will
actually,
be. They have no case.
I'm super glad you brought that up because there's a case in Kenya
Uh,
and it involved Meta that was their vendor, I
like
believe was Sama. And
Sama case. Yes.
yes, and so they're, brave people spoke up because again they're very afraid of getting fired or, then but they brought a suit against Sama and Meta for they, very low wages, very difficult working conditions, and then they were also moderating really horrifying content from, the darkest reaches of the internet. And so they brought this lawsuit, and Meta argued that they should not be named as a defendant in this case because they were not the employers of um of the
Hmm.
people bringing lawsuits. So I mean, it's it's just astonishing, but I think that, and
And
partly what frustrates me is, and we've seen this with so many other aspects of technology, the these big tech companies have such deep pockets that a lot of the time they would rather just let it play out in court than take responsibility. And they can, the payouts that then they are ordered to pay are, again, like it's it's pretty nominal. So
and
it's just sad that they're not, they can't just on their own take responsibility.
it's true. With in history, like Apple has been always known to abuse children in the iPhone making, and still people, we are all the world know about it, and this did not affect neither their sales or the iPhone halo around it, and they walk away with it. They will never have any impunity, never were dragged to court. They just walk away as nothing happened. It's the bygones. Do you see the same happen as the same cycle will happen with AI? People will know about there is a ghost worker, there is exploitation, there is this, and nothing will change. Did you like our conscience is faltered? Is like is no longer moving towards the right or wrong. That our compass is numb.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the ultimate responsibility is on these companies. I don't fault people for not knowing, particularly about the labor exploitation. There was some news coverage. 60 Minutes actually did a story, but was interesting
Of
to
the
me is
impact.
they never, and it was about Scale AI and a couple of these other vendors, but they never mentioned Alexander Wang. So, call these people out by name. Um, so, I think that we've seen the pattern that big tech companies are, they'll get away with whatever they can get away with. And
Unfortunately.
in the end, they're just rarely really held to account. And, again, this is just, and I think with AI, it's on such a massive scale. And whether it's labor exploitation or copyright infringement or, lack of guardrails, whatever it is. And, we all are using, I mean, I use these models.
We
We
all
are,
do.
we all do. And it's designed to get us addicted, just like social media. And so I think that unfortunately it becomes more incumbent on the people using the technology to at least be aware and and really what we need to demand is just a transparency in the supply chain. And one of the one of the biggest I mean, there's so many ironies about
Yeah.
this, but one of the biggest ironies is OpenAI, their mission is to serve humanity. And it begs the question, well, what humanity are you talking
Define
about?
humanity.
So obviously it's people in wealthy Western countries. And it's clearly the people that will pay for their services and pay a lot of money for their services to have the sanitized data. So, but it obviously does not include people in the global South, and so they're completely marginalized once again. And again, I think what's frustrating is there's such an opportunity
Yeah.
to really elevate people, and it's just instead they choose to exploit them.
I totally agree with you. Okay, do you see any way from your experience that we can enforce any governance or any ethics or to force these companies to change their course? Because my problem is like that they normalize abusing whatever it is, so to accelerate. So they give themselves an excuse to walk away with it, and it's okay. History will be forgotten or bygones. And normalizing it actually, what actually concerns me now, because this has become a pattern, not or a habit, or the best route to take if you want to move on. Otherwise, you will be left behind because all the system is supporting acceleration over think like let's build foundational program or foundational path that can help us all that we cannot be liable for it afterwards for its damage.
Yeah, and I think that that's the plan. I mean, and again, all this is happening in real time, so there's sort of debate about um, how much this will continue. But one thing to keep in mind is that the data, new data is being created every day,
Yeah,
as every minute of every day in the news and academic papers, and then obviously on the internet. So, and that was sort of one of my points was that, is in my chapter, and it was postulated by Gray and Surrey in a book called Ghost Writers. Ghost Writers, not Ghost Writers. um, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but it's the hidden ghost work, and
Go for it.
so it's. I think that they sort of think, at some point maybe the systems will become sophisticated enough that they can actually filter the data. And once you've trained these systems, um, so I think they just sort of think this will all be brushed under the rug. But so you're building right now, you're building out this massive
Structure.
infrastructure. So it's a little bit like the railroads, and the slave labor that was produced. A lot of the railroads were Chinese immigrants, or you think about the infrastructure that was built by enslaved people. Washington D.C. was built by enslaved people. So it's just this pattern that continues. And I just think that they think it can kind of just be brushed under the rug until maybe these technologies can get to the point where they don't even need these people, which of course, then they can throw them away. So we do need to hold these tech companies to account.
Accountable.
And so I've grappled a lot with how you do that, right? And I think that where if I go really, if I if I'm feeling pessimistic, it feels sort of intractable where, they will continue to do what they do, and, they basically are untouchable. So first of all, they need to take responsibility, which likely they won't. I do think about in some of the tech
Is there any
companies,
movement or petition?
if, yeah, like
Mm.
employees, if they were aware, because I think a lot of them just aren't. There's been examples of employees taking a stand and with Amazon with environmental issues. And another good example was Google with Project Maven, which was a Department of Defense contract.
Even in Microsoft, there was
And
a case. Uh, yeah, I'm not going to bring it up, but it's when they did a lot of damage, and they were responsible of the killing of Palestinian, and they stopped this program to help with facial recognition, and they stopped it when people start talking about it and made a lot of fuss about it.
so, yeah, so the tech workers have power. And so
Yes.
I think that is something, they've showed that they can push back, and they've done it before. Um, and, and also, as if the public has better understanding, I mean, we really need to demand transparency from the big tech companies so people can understand that whole supply chain. Um, and I was at a conference and they were talking about, um, it wasn't specific to labor exploitation, but some of the ethics. And, it was brought
Mhm.
up that people can um, write to their Congress people and things like that. But I felt I felt that in the end, the the people in these companies, they shouldn't be putting it off on the end user, because really they should take
Yeah.
responsibility. But obviously they aren't. So, that's where we can try
Yeah.
to do what we
Yeah.
can.
From you have been in this arena about how to you heard a lot, you have seen a lot from your experience and your span of Microsoft and other technology. We know that the government will support this oligarch and this tech poet and whatever they are going to do. They are not going to unplug their power. In the contrary, they are going to give it. Do you think, and for people, sorry, sorry, do you think that this will cause open source or people to be like in parallel, to be another arm to fight it? Because it's like we need a collective or unity, like a movement to make it. Like governmental route is gonna take time, and our loss is going to be apparent at the end. So, do you think it's going to open a lots of open source model, a US open source model, or like a parallel, just to quit from this one to remove the independence of this model, so to weaken them? Like I remember, maybe you know him, Jaron Lanier. And Jaron Lanier, he was one of the tech ethicists, and he was against certain behavior from Google and even Microsoft and Apple. And he started to say, let's open, make library and open source to make it accessible to people, to give them the option. I know this is a tech savvy route, but it's still I find it the best way to dilute a little bit of their power, because they're not going to listen to us. They want what they want, and the government is with them, and there is no law to protect us.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it still comes down to their what's gonna be the business model that will benefit them the most and where they can make, you know, get the most value and drive the most profits. So whether, we end up landing on open source, and I think it's more about if the Chinese force their hands on open source, but, I don't I mean, yeah, I think that it's a hard problem to solve, right? And, I mean, one thing that I want people to understand is it's not a technology problem, it's a human problem where, um, just giving respect and dignity to people that are of paramount importance to the current systems that we're building.
And we have seen, in COVID time, when someone gets infected, we are all affected. It's not that they are in different country that we are immune from it. They are these people, and even if you exploit them, if they make riots or make problem, the repercussions of their problem will come to you like butterfly effect, will affect you in a way or another. And actually, this should be considered in building. But again, most business is capitalist driven, and we all know that greed will take you nowhere. For me personally, I believe, especially with OpenAI, it will be diluted. Microsoft is going to get it on a free play because they are on operational level. They are very bad. They have no foundation whatsoever, and I believe Microsoft will just going to absorb them just to save them from their debt that is accumulated by their operational method is not just abusive, it's destructive and has no foundational. Like again, when I tell you like Microsoft, Google, Apple, they abuse in a way in their growth, but still they sustain because they understand what is business, they understand the market, they have foundational, they play by the real book. They invented the book, like let's accelerate, they get it like a Porsche style, let's just race. But who defined this race? It was decided by them in their heads. Let's just cash and run. And now there is no cash to collect. And they have been abusing every, not just by both work, it's like every unethical, or I'm not gonna say illegal, but they did everything's possible to 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 sustain a narrative. They build it and it doesn't exist because the foundational model is wrong. Not just about being abused, the ghost work, the SEC, the nocturnal design. They need, they miss one core problem is like inclusion. Let's include everyone. The inclusion doesn't exist. It's not how to have an ethics. Ethics for what? Ethics for what we believe in, or ethics for what the universe wants, or the ethics for what people want. There was no factors. We were not factored in any of their equations. And the governments, they show me the money. This is only the language. Show me the money. And now OpenAI ask even the White House to bail them and offer them like 5% stake, which is it's like to show they're losers. Like it's like this is you cannot just do it in public. But the fact that they ask proves the point that greed will take you nowhere. Maybe it is the anger of these people. Maybe you build something on people's shoulders, on people's dignity, on people's future without the permission or their consent.
Yeah, and I
And
mean, I'm
yeah,
I'm a capitalist. I mean, I believe,
yes,
in
I'm a
a free
capitalist too, but
market.
it's not on people's shoulder.
Yeah, and I mean,
Like
so the
making money,
tension.
there is fun in making money, but making it with dignity, make it properly. It's like there is joy in making money, and no one can deny that. But do it in an ethical way, in a way that doesn't shame you afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, so the tension there is that, you know, it, they obviously have to make a profit, but there's absolutely no reason why they can't follow some basic ethics. And, I think it's just the whole cognitive dissonance that I experience when I'm using these models. But the big question that I'm asking and people need to ask is, what can we do to ensure that people are treated fairly? I mean, it seems like a very basic. It should
But
just be the start point. So, and like I said, the big tech has really insinuated themselves into the highest levels of government. I mean, it was no mistake that all the tech bros were at the inauguration, and they're stepping up, they're lobbying, because they're fighting tooth and nail to have completely no regulations. So it's and I find it alarming, just the like I said, we talked about sort of this revolving door between the private sector and the public sector.
yeah. So to wrap it up, how do you think or how do you advise people to be conscious in the usage of AI, or what they can, because this is a burden as an information wise. When I know there is third price, like a ghost worker, like exploitation, like OPEC design, how this should affect my decision making on or my behavior while using AI.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Um, there is a model. It's produced by a Swiss company. It's called chat.publicai.co, and they hold themselves to higher ethics and including paying fair wages for labor. Um,
Hmm.
but I would say use that when you can. But I know that we're going to use
Not enough.
models that are most powerful. Um, I again, like if there was some transparency, I do think Microsoft and Google have some. They sort of try to hold themselves to higher standards as far as just their policies. But uh, again, it's hard to know because you really don't have a window into it. Um, there is also an organization. It's called Fair Work, and
Okay.
they do a rating of certain categories of ethics and which tech firms are, who is following or holding themselves to higher standards. And so that would be an organization to look to and get up on their website um, and but so I think that it's hard because I think
It's very
sometimes
difficult.
you can feel pretty helpless in this situation. But again, I think just there's a lot of people don't even know about this um, exploitation and hidden ghost workers. So it starts with awareness and hopefully lobbying and
I
asking these companies to do the right thing. But it's just sad we have to ask that. And I I hate to say it, but I don't, if unless they're forced to do it, I don't see them doing it on their own. So,
I agree. Is there any petition or any action is taken by people so we can sign or even join to say to force this company to be either accountable or to force them to pay? Because if they push an IPO, they will pay nothing. They walk away from everything because it's a new chapter. So do you suggest any or do are you aware of any movement or action in place right now, or just a debate discussions
so I know that there's a petition for copyright and compensation. Um,
for
I
writers and music will soon?
Yeah, I think that I would say fair work is the start point, and um, I mean, there are petitions that people pull together and post online, and so that might
Right.
be something as well.
People. Um, Thank you so much for all your insights and actually the spotlight you mentioned on this one, on this topic, because it's very touchy and people avoid just politics or any dark sides for their career. But I believe that the problem is we are divided spatially. Like it's not us and them, it is like third world and first world. And this actually labels what we first need to change. We need to treat people we are equal. But this is won't happen because we need governmental enforces about the definition about humanity and how the trade between countries should happen. Because will it fall in a universal paradigm of definition, or it's going to fall under supply and demand? Because if it's falling under supply and demand, so this company will always find a way to abuse these people. And it's like chicken or eggs. Which one we should tackle first? But I think inclusion and universal definition and paradigm for all over the world, that's what we need to start with, not just with the US company. Because it's again, it's going to be said why we started. It's like capitalism will always rule supply and demand, say, let's do it. They approved it, they signed, and I'm sure they signed tons of legal paper to waive all the rights. So they have no legal ground to stand up on anything. The pattern and playbook that is already been established is wrong, but it is not what needs to be changed. What it needs to be changed is actually our definitions of what or how to treat each other. I'm not going to say it's type of racism, but it's we need to understand what is dignity, what is work, what is how to respect others. Not from U.S. perspective, but from a global perspective. A Kenyan worker is deserved to live in decent way and get paid to his work. Like the gap should be tightened a little bit. And I think this is the wrap for your chapter. This is going to be your message. Let's include everyone with fair treatment and avoid all this dark cycle and Mobius cycle of opaque design.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
Do you
the
have
other thought is just, I mean, I think in an ideal world, um, these countries could have sovereign AI, right? But that also takes a lot of money and resources.
true?
So and then, and what's interesting is in places like Africa, they
Yeah.
are taking a lot more thoughtful approach in how they want to, you roll out or build out these models. But obviously, right now, the U.S. is driving the technology, so it's um it's a huge imbalance of power. So anyway, I hope that at some point these companies will take responsibility. It's certainly, I mean, it's been going on for quite some time, but certainly, there's still these people can be tracked. So it would be really nice to see um, these workers be compensated.
I hope so. Okay, Celeste, do you have anything or any part that you? I think we touched all your chapter and all your main points. If there is anything you want to address to our audience, we have already some people joining us live.
I I think we covered it. So
Yeah,
I just appreciate you having me and being able to discuss a very, very important topic that
I'm conscious.
a lot of people just aren't aware of, and it's not their fault. I mean, the whole system has been built in a way to ensure people don't have an awareness of this issue.
Yeah, no wonder they call it renting economy. They rent on something. They start it by renting from your dignity, your time, your wage, everything. It, build it on a renting economy. Celeste, thank you so much for your time. I know that
Yeah.
I've been pushing for this one, but this is an important topic to discuss and make people aware of it. So to be conscious with their behavior when they are acting was not about just utility, about the labor who did it, that they are not compensated for it. So at least to be thankful.
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Celeste. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.